and roll, did iron out something else.
All right, everybody. My apologies. We're going to get started. When the committee meets but does not have an actual quorum, every item that is sent out of the committee will be subject to a public hearing again in council chambers, and the items will be reported as recommendations from Mr. Zine and myself rather than actions of the committee, for those of you who care. You may not care, and I can handle that too. Anyway, so we're going to begin today's meeting. I'm Jack Weiss. I'm joined by Councilmember Dennis Zine. Mr. Zine, on the agenda, there are 3 items that we could move on consent. Item 4 is an item that Mr. Parks usually calls special because it involves a donation to your district. Item 5, supplemental police account. Item 6, the Archangel grant. Do you have any need to call any of those special, Mr. Zine?
Not special. I just have a question regarding how does the police department thank the folks for the donations, such as on item number 4, $24,000 worth of equipment. How do we actually thank the West Valley Boosters for that donation? And then I don't have any problem.
Police Department, do you send thank you notes, LAPD? You want to borrow some letterhead from Mr. Zine? He can make a donation to you, and you can thank the people who made a donation.
Very nice.
We call that item special.
Morning, Peter DiCarlo from the Police Department. Normally, the area sends out a letter of thanks to the donor for the whatever it might be. So that's typically how it's handled.
Okay, well, maybe for a donation of $24,000, maybe it should come from a higher command than the division. I'm just thinking that people donate large sums of money for different equipment, maybe from the commission, the chief of police, something to show appreciation, to show our appreciation for their generous contribution. I mean, it's nice from the captain, which they deal with. Maybe it should come from the chief, the commission. I'm just thinking we don't express enough appreciation for people who go out of their way to give the department goods and services without any consideration.
Richard Tiefank, Executive Director of the Police Commission. All donations that are received by the Commission, there is a letter sent to the donor thanking them on behalf of the Police Commission and the Department. That is correct, sir.
In your previous life,
Donor.
as the chief, what'd you do?
I sent a personal letter.
Personal letter?
Yeah.
As the chief of police?
Yes.
Okay, I just think it's appropriate to do that since they're very generous. And the West Valley Boosters have been extremely generous over the years to provide equipment, facilities to the West Valley LAPD, which Mr. Weiss and I both share with the West Valley Division. So I just want to make sure we're giving them enough appreciation for
All
what
right.
they're doing.
Thank you for the thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I had.
All right. So those items will go forward as consent and recommendations from Mr. Zine and myself. Mr. White, let's begin with item 1 on DNA.
Item 1, Police Department to present verbal report relative to the status of DNA testing, backlog, and cold hits.
Morning, Ms. Sanchez-Owens and
Good morning.
others.
Yvette Sanchez-Owens, LAPD Commanding Officer, Scientific Investigation Division. I've got the numbers for this week. There are a total of 7,376 cases in the backlog at LAPD. Of those cases, 494 have been requested for testing. So that leaves 6,882 cases that have not been tested. They're still sitting in the backlog. As of 2/1, we had 101 cases in screening and 112 cases in profiling. As of 2/1, we have had a total of cold hits, offender to case cold hits, of 2 for this last reporting period. That brings us up total to date to 679 offender to case cold hits. You had also asked last time that I bring in stats with regard to the number of cold hits we've had by division since the inception of the CODIS database. Since 2001, in Central Bureau, we had 17 cold hits. In Rampart, 49 cold hits. Southwest, 45. Hollenbeck, 10. Harbor, 19. Hollywood, 58.
Sorry, Hollywood, how much?
58.
Yeah.
Wilshire, 51. West LA, 18. Van Nuys, 37. West Valley, 21. Northeast, 19. 77th, coincidentally, 77. Newton, 19. Pacific, 21. North Hollywood, 40. Foothill, 27. Devonshire, 34. Southeast, 92. And Mission, 21.
You know, if you could just, you'll give us a copy of that.
I sure
Because
will.
and make sure that Ms. Stengel knows precisely what, you know, those are just cold hits, all cold hits?
All cold hits.
Homicide, rape, anything?
Yes.
Presumably, it's homicide and rape, or is it mostly one or the other?
I didn't break them down that far, but we can if you'd like.
But that's what it means, right?
Yes.
I mean, because what I'd like to do with that is I will send a letter to the full council with those stats, because I think they're really quite extraordinary, and just, you know, off the top of my head, without really analyzing it, I think you said Rampart 49, Southwest 45, Hollywood 58, Wilshire 51, 77th 77, and Southeast 92. I mean, from the naked eye, it appears that you're talking about the most heavily crime-ridden parts of the town, the densest and often the poorest parts of town. You've seen the greatest results. I mean, just if you had to just from 30,000 feet, that's what that looks like.
Yes, it sure does.
Which I think would be impressive to many people and an interesting fact. What other facts did you want to present today, any of you?
Just our hits from Tia Morris, Lieutenant Morris, from Robbery Homicide Division Cold Case Unit. And we have our totals year-to-date this year versus last year. And our total CODIS hits that we show are 29 this year versus 34 last year. Homicide hits, there are 2 as compared to 2 last year, at the same time last year. Sexual assault, 16 versus 19 from last year. And all other hits, there are 11. That's 4 for burglary, 2 robbery, and 5 other hits, other crimes, as compared to 13 for the same time last year. And what we've also done is we've prepared information of CODIS hits by council district that are broken down by year and crime. And so just...
Well, that'd be yeah, run through it, and that's another document that I'd like to forward on to the council so they can see.
Okay, and so it's quite a few numbers, so I'd rather provide this information to you, and then if you had questions at the next meeting, we could give you a response to the breakdown or what
Sure.
it represents.
If you look at it, though, is there anything that jumps off the page or that looks like an interesting stat?
Nothing is interesting other than what we would expect, that in some council districts there's more crime than in other council districts. We have, say for instance, in Council District 13, Garcetti's district, we have quite a few more than, say, in Council District 1. And they're broken down, some of them, like in Council District 1, they're all broken down by year as well. So in we had 1 hit in 99, 1 in 2003, 04, 06, and 07. But again, to provide a better document, I think it'd be better for us to give you more information. But I just wanted you to know
Thank
that
you.
we are doing that and comparing it to the council districts, and we'll also have available for you the information on the status of the offenders. We'll let you know if it's an offender hit versus a case-to-case hit, and on those
Well, that's
offender hits,
great.
what's important is that you know what the status of that offender is.
Thank you, Lieutenant, and I'll make sure that the council receives that information.
Okay.
And the mayor as well. Thank you. I had a question, but I'll wait. Is there anything else that anyone at the table wanted to say at this point?
I did want to give you an update on the cases that we have taken under the $100,000 that you donated. As of the 24th of January, 21 cases were identified so far for this project. 6 cases were screened, 3 were negative for biological evidence, 3 were positive, and those were sent out for profiling. 11 cases are in the screening process right now, and 4 cases have yet to be assigned. That's the latest.
Thank you for that. I have a question for you, and which is, Ms. Stengel informs me that per CompStat, there's been a rather noted increase in rape arrests in January '08 as compared to the previous month and compared to January '07. Is that a random fact that is uncorrelated with the work you do? In other words, she informs me that January '08 versus December '07 saw a 57% increase in rape arrests. January '08 versus January '07 saw a 133% increase in rape arrests. And compared to January '06, it's a 75% increase in rape arrests. Is that something that is that related to hits, or is that just related to cases becoming ready when they're ready?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. We would have to know how many of those, we would have to contact those divisions to see how many of those resulted from hits versus just the fresh cases that the investigators just conducted a follow-up on.
Well, I mean, don't do the work, because maybe let's look at your CODIS work, and that will be what it is. But it seemed interesting, but it may, just because it happened, it doesn't mean it's real. Just because your hits are rising doesn't mean statistically that has to be the cause of that rise as well. I thought maybe it was correlated, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, well, if you have any...
Could be, yeah. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it really
All right.
is.
Well, if you have any further thoughts on it, you can collect them and let us know. Mr. Zine, do you have any questions for these folks? Well, thank you very much for coming. I mean, I think every week you just demonstrate that what you do is literally the most important, most productive work in the department in terms of identifying violent predators. And you just do it better and better, and really, really impressed and really grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you, Ms. Mr. White,
Sir.
number 2, please.
Item 2, City Attorney report relative to the feasibility of requiring landlords to check the Megan's Law database before renting or leasing space to a tenant, or annually upon commencement of the lease, to ensure the property owner is aware of sexual offender status of the tenant.
Good morning, Ms. Reel.
Good morning, Deputy City Attorney Judith Reel. This is a supplemental report. We were asked, and Anne Marie Sauer of the CLA's office, Detective Diane Webb of LAPD, and myself, we met with ITA personnel to discuss whether to recommend establishing an 800 number for tenants and landlords to call to report concerns about registered sex offenders, or to encourage people to call 311. And after our meeting, we agreed to recommend that people call 311. The city is phasing out the use of 800 numbers, and we believe that the 311 is more economical and equally effective.
Detective or Mr. Fernandez, anybody want to add to what Ms. Reel said?
Well, we've currently updated all the links, giving information on who to contact, and basically what we need to put in place is a tracking system for fielding those calls and disseminating them to the registration enforcement and compliance teams throughout the city.
Okay, Mr. Fernandez?
Yeah, Roger Fernandez, ITA. I'm here to represent 311. This is something that we're ready to start doing at not additional cost to the city. On a regular basis, we work really closely with the police department, since we do take a lot of public safety related. So
you can layer this into your training, and you think it'll, I mean, I take it the operators, they have a notebook or sheets in front of them?
What happened is, when we developed the 311, what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to grow as the city grows and implemented new systems. What we did is we developed the citywide service directory, which is is knowledge of, is a database of knowledge of city services. So in this case, LAPD would just have to go ahead and enter instructions on what they want us to say and do with the colors, and we would just go ahead and route those calls.
Ms. Reel?
Yeah, there was one ancillary issue, and the original report recommended the creation of a poster, and that's how the 311 versus 800 number came up. And ITA has an in-house graphics designer, and they have offered the designer services to work with us, LAHD, AGLA, and the Apartment Association to design some kind of poster. And Ms. Gibson of the CLA CLA's office has offered to work with us and AGLA and CAA that perhaps we can design a poster for the city's website, which can be downloaded and then sent to their members.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Mr. Zine, before we get to questions, we have two public comment cards from Tara Bannister and Jim Clark, representing the apartment folks. Don't go too far. They just need one or two. And then following your presentation, we'll ask the staff to come back, and Mr. Zine can ask his questions. So welcome. You each have a couple minutes. Thank you.
You want to go first? Go ahead. Okay. Good morning. I'm Tara Bannister, Executive Director of the California Apartment Association. I live and work here in Los Angeles.
And you're a tenant.
Oh, yes, that's right, and I am a tenant in this wonderful city. Judy mentioned to us just this morning before the meeting began about the idea of a challenge of having to pay for the printing of the poster and the dissemination of the poster. And as I've been sitting here actually getting distracted by listening to the DNA, because that was so interesting, I recognize we have two sources we really needed to communicate with. Actually, it's three. One is the tenants, one was the landlords, and then the third is, of course, all the other jurisdictions in this wonderful country and state of ours, so that everybody else can follow your lead. I am well aware, because most of what I do is actually not talking to people like yourselves, but is coming up with funding sources of how to get things done when we need to pay for them and don't have a dedicated source. I communicate to other landlords and tenants through books like Apartment Guide, websites like forrent.com, through, of course, other landlord attorneys and other different sources. So there's many ways that we can communicate this through other channels that are set up. The one other thing I need to mention to you is, since our last time that we were here in December, we've had our state meetings and our national meetings, and I would say what we are doing here is something that everybody is thoroughly excited about, because it is a partnership between our associations and landlords and government to solve a problem that, to say the least, is a huge problem, would be underestimating what you are doing. Because I have personally been involved with hundreds of landlords that have had to pay off sex offenders to move out to protect the other tenants. And this will solve that problem. And when I say this is a big deal, that means there are free press abilities. This is a news story. So we have a way of communicating for free, if you are willing, of course, to talk to the media significantly.
Thank you, Ms. Bannister. Mr. Clark.
Jim Clark, Manager of Government Relations for the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. We represent up to 25,000 owners and managers across the city and the greater LA area. I embrace this idea. Our hands are tied at the state level because we cannot use the Megan's Law website to deny housing in the multifamily buildings. So that there is a danger lurking. And I think that having the ability to go directly to REACT, the division or the section of the LAPD, with any unusual conduct or misbehavior sexually inside these buildings, having this outlet for tenants and managers is very, very important. But I want to stress that if it's going to work and have an impact, the awareness of the program has got to be built. And Tara mentioned a poster, and the poster was also mentioned by Judy Reel. I think that it'd be great if we could download the poster off of a website, but I think more importantly, I would like to get these posters directly into owners and managers' hands. I'm here willing to make an offer that we would distribute these posters in our magazine, which circulates 44,000, if the city would be willing to pay for the printing of the posters. I don't think that these they're not so big the way I'm picturing it, but 8.5 by 11 times 4, whatever that size is.
Paper, you put it in your magazine?
Yeah, we put it as an insert in our magazine.
But if you guys have a magazine, can't you just print it?
It'd be too small. We're talking a big poster that we could fold up in quarters, and it would be an extra insert. So yes, it would cost money, but we're not for profit. We don't have all that much money to make the posters and put them in ourselves. But we could distribute them because we have a monthly magazine.
Okay.
Does that make? Okay.
Well, thank you for the offer. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your consideration.
Well, once you guys have a seat, we'll ask Ms. Reel and Paul to come back up, and Mr. Zine, take it away.
I have a question regarding the CLA's recommendation, and they want to report back when funds have been identified for the purpose. Do we have any funds at this time to implement this, or do we have to wait till we get funds available?
The issue with the poster, I'm sorry, Anne Marie Sauer with the CLA. The issue with the poster is the funding. We can go ahead and implement the rest of this without there being any costs. It's just the issue of the funding piece is the printing of the posters. But in terms of the rest of it, we can put we can put a link on the city's website, the PD's website. We can have, you can call 311, so that can all get implemented immediately.
So the only part that's going to remain is the poster part, and that is based upon the funding.
Right, and I mean, the poster downloading from the website, that obviously, Judy pointed out, wouldn't be a cost. That's just getting it done. But in terms of distributing it, printing it, that's where the cost is.
So what if we had a smaller version of the poster that went in the apartment magazine, and they would then distribute that with their normal publication, and if we have to wait for the funds for a poster, a trifold, we could wait for that, but meanwhile, we could have something designed, include it in the magazine as a regular page.
So, Mr. Zine, do you have the current recommendation? Is this the most recent there are different recommendations here, and I think he might be reading from an older version?
I'm looking at the February 4th.
Yeah, but I think they might have changed what they,
Yes,
would you explain
there
it
was
to
a
him?
revision.
Okay.
Yes.
I haven't had the update, but here it is. Breaking news.
Why don't you just
Anyway,
tell
basically,
them the
so what we were ultimately then recommending is that we go this route where we put the link on the website, and we were holding off kind of tabling the piece in terms of the posters at this point. We were kind of, even though the city attorney addressed that in their report, we were just saying, right now there's no money, so we're not going there. So instead, we were saying, move forward, implement the 311 piece of it, put something on the website, note and file the city attorney's report, and that's how we were recommending that this all
Do we
be
have
dealt with.
someone available to design it with current costs?
Yes, we're going to use our graphic designer in-house to go ahead and design this
So I
at no
don't know why
cost.
we couldn't go ahead and proceed with that, and while we wait for funds to actually find funds to establish fund for the poster, whatever we design could go on the website, we could give to Mr. Clark, that could then be duplicated in the apartment owners magazine, and at least we've got something going. And then, as the funds come available, we could then think about posters. But this way, at least people who opened up that apartment magazine will be able to see something. And that will then get the word out, we can start spreading the message. So I think if we could follow that with no additional expense, and obviously the cost factor is going to be an issue for the posters that would be distributed. Mr. Clark, would that be satisfactory with you? If you had a poster, you could reduce it in size to put it in one of the folds of
Yeah,
the...
we could develop an ad, and obviously we have articles that we could write to build awareness, but, part of the...
Could you speak in the microphone, Jim?
Sorry.
The concern here is the magazine goes to the owners. So the vision is that the poster would be hung in a laundry room or an office or rec room so that the tenants can see it.
Right.
So it's not just, again, it's not just the owners we're trying to get to, it's the tenants. And that's why we wanted a poster that would unfold, that would actually be in the magazine, that the owner could put up on the property. Okay?
And I support that, but while we don't have the funds for the...
I understand.
this time,
Yes.
we get something.
We can do all we can to get the word out, but again, it would go to the owners and the managers for now.
And if someone sees that, spreads the message, meanwhile, we end up more publicity on this.
Sure.
We end up getting funds. from
Yeah, we would encourage owners to put out little bulletins to their tenants, maybe, hang a bulletin on there. A lot of them do it, monthly bulletins to their tenants, that kind of thing. We could do it that way, but I think that the total impact, reminding the tenants a poster in a laundry room or a rec room or something like that would be the best way to go.
Okay.
Might recommend one more thing. We would be willing to go ahead and also use Channel 35 to do more publicity, so we're willing to help.
That's another publicity that we have through the city's Channel 35, and whatever public safety spots they can obtain from the regular media. So, Mr. Chair, if we could do that and just include it in that.
Sure.
That way everything goes forward, and if the funds come in for posters down the road, so we go with that at that time.
Can we add those items, Mrs. Sawyer?
Yes, I think that's fine.
Okay, so we can add those items. Any other questions?
That's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reel and everybody, and we will send that forward to council with those adjustments.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
So to clarify, the instruction is, as is stated here in my notes, ITA include the REACT team information on the city website and additional remarks from Mr. Zion regarding working with the
The
apartment.
ITA is going to design the poster, put it on the city website, put it on Channel 35.
We'll have it on 3-on-1. I assume John got that piece as well, exactly. And then note and file the city attorney's report.
Thank you.
You get the 3-1-1.
All right?
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Okay, next item, which is the last item on the agenda, right, Mr. White? 3?
That's correct. Item number 3, CAO and CLA report, joint report relative to the status of the agreement and performance of Carbon LLC to evaluate the production of the City of Los Angeles triathlon pursuant to motion. Zion Smith.
Good morning, Veronica Salumbidas with the Office of the CAO. The report before you is in response to the Sign-Smith motion, which instructed the CAO, with the assistance of the CLA, LAPD, and DOT, to report on the status of the agreement with Carbon LLC. The motion also asked regarding the feasibility of issuing a request for proposal to select a contractor for future triathlon events. Our office, with the assistance of your CLA and the other departments, reviewed the requirements and milestones of the existing contract, and we found that the organizer is substantially in compliance with the requirements of the contract. However, due to the length of the agreement with the current organizer, we recommend that the city conduct a new request for proposal process. The contractor was selected almost 8 years ago. We also found that it is in the city's best interest to update and modify the current contract. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Ozawa, anything that you want to add to that?
We totally support going out for an RFP at this point. At the time that the original agreement was competitively bid, or the project, there was only one bidder. Now we've come to know that there are at least 2 other bidders, probably more, that would probably, that could bring a better event to the city or help us in many ways. There's also been some letters that have come to light even after this report was issued that have also given us additional reason that it would be good to have a competitive process and modify our contract at this point.
Well, we have a number of public comment cards, but before we get to them, I'd like to ask David Simon to come forward. He's someone who a lot of us look to for leadership and guidance in the city on sports issues, and so I don't want to run the clock on you. David, I'd love to just hear what, because I see you here today, and obviously want to hear your input and what your thoughts are.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I came just to address the issue of the RFP. The City of Los Angeles Triathlon exists because a little over 10 years ago, I approached then Council President John Ferraro after the 1996 Olympics to tell him that triathlon was being added to the Olympic program for the first time as a medal sport in 2000, and suggesting that the city take a look at an RFP for triathlon to run an annual race. The city had originally looked at that in the late 80s, but unsuccessfully. And at that time, the city then followed by putting out an RFP in the spring of 1997. But the contract with the eventual organizer wasn't signed until the first quarter of 2000, almost 3 years later. And my concern is the timing here. If you had a contractor who was out of compliance, then I would certainly support going out for an RFP. But when you have someone who is substantially in compliance, I'm concerned that you're jeopardizing the 2009 and 2010 races by considering an RFP now.
What is the term of the contract that's been signed with the current contractor?
The original contract was for 3 years, and it was extended an additional 5 years, so it expires at the end of 2008.
So it currently expires, okay, so under the current contract, there is, the current contract contracts for the 2008 triathlon?
Right.
Which is when?
September.
And following that 2008 triathlon with the current vendor, if nothing else in the world happened, what would happen next with respect to an LA triathlon?
If nothing else happened,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have one in
Okay,
2009.
So if it expires, and so is your proposal to go out, would that in any way affect the September 08 triathlon?
It
No.
shouldn't.
No, it won't.
So in light of that, what should I understand about the term and the timing?
Well, Mike, I think any triathlon organizer would tell you the reason it's an annual race is if you're going to do it right, you need to start planning at least a year in advance. And so you would need to identify the contractor for next year's triathlon and subsequent years before this year's race, ideally.
So
that's
for
7 months
09,
away.
okay.
Right, for '09. And my concern is that the time to develop the RFP, to put it out and get responses, to evaluate those responses, and then negotiate a contract with the contractor and have the city council approve that is unlikely to happen based on history in the next 6 months. That's my concern. And by initiating that process, you're jeopardizing the '09 and potentially the 2010 race, and that in turn would impact the city's reputation for staging these events successfully. So that's my concern.
And, okay, hearing that concern from Mr. Simon, what do you say?
We believe there's enough time to get a new contractor on board before the 2008 event, and it would give them the new whoever the contractor is, based on this competitive process, at least a year.
Do this, instead of saying what your belief is, tell us what you, what the timeline would be for the process that you have proposed.
Well, if...
Because that's relevant to Mr. Simon's concern. Just so, what's the timeline?
My hope is that it could be through council by the beginning of March.
What is? The letting out of the RFP or the?
The decision to actually go to RFP.
Okay, so the RFP goes out by March.
Right.
Comes back in when?
Excuse me, that does not mean to me that the RFP goes out in March. The city might decide to put one out, but typically that RFP doesn't go out the next day. There's a process of development.
Okay. So just, I mean...
It's being developed as we speak.
Let me back up for a second. I understand your belief and hope, but are Mr. Simon's concerns about timing, and I understand you believe it can be done, but are those important and relevant concerns?
I understand his concerns, and I agree that if we had a gap in 2009 of not having an event, that it would not help us in bidding for a future Olympics in the city.
No, but you got to drill down. Is Mr. Simon correct that if there is no contract for an 09, if there is no contractor selected for an 09 triathlon prior to the 08 triathlon, that would jeopardize the 09 triathlon? Is that fact correct?
I don't know that for a fact, but I would tend to agree with him.
Okay, so if you tend to agree with him, then it would be really important to get the entire process done before September 08.
Absolutely.
Do you have a timeline to get it done before September 08?
Yes, we do.
And what is that timeline?
We would have an RFP issued by the middle of March. There would be 45 days to turn it around and get the responses in. And then within another 45 days, we would have selected a contractor and recommended them to council. So that would put us in the middle of June. And then give the council another month to select. And then we would negotiate a contract before September.
Okay. Mr. Simon, and then I'm going to call the other public comment.
Sure. And in response to that, I would simply say, I don't have it handy, but I would urge you to review the timelines that were followed in 1997 to 2000 and use that as a caution. Because I believe that the 45 days that just mentioned is very ambitious, and I think that it was 90 to 180 days the last time, though I can't state that as a fact, but that's my recollection. And I would just say I'm sure the city staff was very optimistic at that time as well, but it played out over nearly a 3-year period. That is my concern.
My last comment is, because we've already issued an RFP in the past for this event, it will be a lot easier to modify that this time around, and so the timeline can be shortened.
And I might just point out, the city had issued an RFP before the 1997 RFP. In the late 1980s, after the marathon was first launched, the city took a look at launching a triathlon. An RFP was put out at that time. A contractor was selected. Ultimately, the contractor never performed. But there was a history even then.
Okay, let's hear the other cards, and then we'll discuss more.
Thank you.
And we're going to run the clock for the other cards, and I'll read 3 names in a row: Ian Murray, Peter Douglas, Jack Caress.
My name is Ian Murray. I own a company called Triathletics. I'm a triathlon coach. I live here in Los Angeles. My business is in Los Angeles. Been a triathlon coach for nearly a decade. Selected Coach of the Year last year, Level 2 certified. It's my career. USA Triathlon is our national governing body. I'm thrilled to hear that you would consider putting this out to RFP. And I would hope that the future race is a USAT, USA Triathlon sanctioned event. They are the organization of record. They legitimize our sport. They set the rules for and assure the safety of our races. They train and support the officials that secure the safety at every race. They rank our athletes nationally. They certify our coaches. They nurture our youth and junior programs. They validate our professionals, and they select our athletes that go to the Olympics. It's not just Chicago's triathlon that's USAT certified, or New York's, or Dallas's, or Miami's. The reality is that there is greater merit to a race in Oxnard because it's USAT certified. There is greater merit to a race in San Dimas because it's USAT sanctioned. Our next race director should be one who can work with USAT, and our next race should be a USAT sanctioned race. And just for me to put this in perspective, if at some point in time the city wants to replace the loss of the Raiders or the Rams, we're going to get a football team that's part of the NFL. That's my analogy. And I have to say that, Mr. Simon knows about the inner workings of the city of LA far better than I do, but when he talks about the reputation at being at risk, I think the reputation of our triathlon right now is in jeopardy. And to give 45 days for return, please, this is low-hanging fruit. Race directors are going to need 4 to 5 days to return on this. They're hungry.
Because they're fast.
Because not because they're fast, but because they know the value.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Peter Douglas, Jack Kress, Victor Franco.
Good morning, sir. Committee members, my name is Peter Douglas. I'm the Vice President of Events with Elite Racing in San Diego. I'm part of the competitor group. We're a group of companies formed with Triathlete Magazine, Competitor Magazine, and my entity, Elite Racing. I'm here to urge the city to put this event out to RFP. We're prepared to bid on something of this nature. We produce events throughout the country. We're the founders and originators of the Rock and Roll Series throughout the United States, the Rock and Roll Marathon and Half Marathon. I think that the timeline that we were hearing before, if the city comes up with a proposal that we can respond to, be it mid-March, April, May, or June, we can turn around with a response to that within a couple of weeks. Professional response that I'm sure the council would be able to evaluate, and we could get information in on that quite quickly. We would just very much like to be a part of the RFP process and would like the opportunity to respond to that.
Thank you. Mr. Kress?
Good morning. I'm Jack Caress, the owner of Pacific Sports and the current contractor for the City of Los Angeles Triathlon. 10 years ago, we came and were one of the, well, ended up being the only bidder. There were 3 bidders originally, but we were the one that was, the other 2 dropped out at the last part of it, and we were the ones selected to be the race organizer and producer of the Los Angeles Triathlon. We've had an 8-year history that's been very successful. We've went through some, not unlike the Los Angeles Marathon, we went through a few struggles after the 9/11. But in the last 2 or 3 years, we've really hit our stride. The big turning point was when Kaiser Permanente became our title sponsor in 2006. We recently signed a long-term deal with Herbalife in the last 2 weeks to be a 3-year sponsor of the Los Angeles Triathlon. Our numbers were up 15%. We have had a great success here in Los Angeles, and I see nothing but bigger things in the future. There are a lot of people that would probably like to produce this event that think they can do better than us, and the reason that this is such a valuable event and why so many people might bid on it is because we've created a very valuable sports property. 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think anybody would have been interested in producing the Los Angeles Triathlon. But along with my team, we've created something very valuable. We've brought in a lot of sponsorships. They have multiplied 6 times what they were 4 years ago. The numbers have increased in the number of participants. We have become part of the Lifetime Fitness Series that I founded along with Kevin Steele and Barama Karate. We're now considered one of the major championships. And I personally believe we've done a great job at producing this event. I'm open to answering any questions that the council might have.
Thank you, Mr. Kress. Mr. Franco?
Good morning, council members. Victor Franco with Econac representing the triathlon. And I kind of have a dual perspective here. Number one, years ago, working at Central City Association and trying to lure events into downtown and encourage events into downtown Los Angeles. And that's when I met with Jack Caress and his team with the LA Triathlon. We supported it then. And so as time moved forward, and Mr. Caress was looking to expand and get a real good foothold here in Los Angeles, sought me out after I went off into other directions. But I wanted to address a couple issues here. Number one, the significant growth of the event. I think this event has grown faster than many other events in the city. It's not difficult to do business here in the city, as you well know, dealing with many departments. We've been able to do that. There is no question that the long-term contract is an issue, but I will tell you that we, Mr. Caress, we've had preliminary meetings with some of the council offices, including your office, and Councilmember Parks, and we've addressed a lot of the issues that were issues before. In terms of cost to the city, agreeing to a contract model that is very similar to the Los Angeles Marathon. That would probably require that the triathlon is going to need to pay, maybe pay a little bit more to take care of some of those city costs. We've agreed to do that. We've also agreed to move our route. We had some issues with other council offices, CD4, CD13, even CD1. We've addressed those issues and, in fact, have entered into discussions with Councilmember Parks because he saw a need to, or a want or a concern to pull that into his district, thinking that it could be more of an economic development tool or bring people out. And then, of course, transportation issues in general, working with the DOT. For many years, DOT was pushing the route that we had, but eventually like to move that out. In terms of our outreach, we've done a great job sitting in on committee meetings and the like.
Why is competition a bad thing?
I think competition is not a bad thing, but it's an unknown. And I think you heard your own city staff talk about this operator being in compliance. You know, the old term of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think at the very least you could do in terms of an existing contractor with the city is enter a negotiation, and if they cannot comply or come into what you think is a fair deal for the city or something good for the city, then RFP and so be it. But I think if not giving that opportunity to at least sit down.
But doesn't RFP give them that opportunity too?
I don't think that's a fair opportunity. I think, again, you need to address...
No. But doesn't RFP give them that opportunity too? That was my question.
Well, maybe you ought to address that since you would be potentially bidding. I mean,
Well, it doesn't give us the opportunity to negotiate a contract with the city. It puts it out to bid again, and the reason it would go out to bid is because we've created a valuable property. 4 or 5 years ago, if this would have went out to bid, had our contract been up in 2004, there wouldn't have been anybody anywhere that would have bid for an event that wasn't valuable. The reason that everybody would come out of the woodwork, and Ian pointed out it's low-hanging fruit, is because now they see what we've created, and we've created it. Being honest,
Created it, or has the sport become more popular and more successful?
the sport has become popular, but we've brought in all the sponsors. We do all the marketing. We do all the negotiating. We've expanded the sport nationally by creating a series that I founded. They've gone together.
Okay, well, thank you both. The next cards I have here, pardon me, are Paul Hekimia, apologize if I've mispronounced your name, and Jeff Matlow from USAT.
Captain Frank, are you here on a matter? Captain Frank? There he goes. Were you here on a matter? Sir? Were you here on a matter?
It's already passed.
That's what I wanted to tell you. So you get back to police work.
Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, Captain.
Good morning, members. My name is Paul Hekimian. I'm the president and founder of the LA Tri Club, and we're based here in Los Angeles. We have 1,500 members, and today I just want to back up what Ian was saying about USAT Triathlon being the governing body in our sport and how it's very important to us as members of our club that this race be open for an RFP so that all bidders, including Jack Kress, the current bidder, can look at bringing in USA Triathlon as the governing body because it really does provide a bigger race. And I think if this race wants to continue to grow and get bigger in our sport, we really need to get our governing body behind it because that's who we are. It's like the number one thing that I think will make, I know it's a good race or a great race, but it could be really, this race should be the biggest race in the USA. It really should be. And I think with the governing body behind it, it can be. So that's just all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hekimian. Mr. Matlow is the final public speaker.
Thank you very much. I'm Jeff Matlow. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for USA Triathlon. And as if you haven't heard enough about USA Triathlon yet, I just want to speak to the importance of USAT as it relates to the Los Angeles Triathlon as well as the sport of triathlon in general. There are currently 102,000 members of USAT. As you pointed out, as it was mentioned, triathlon is one of the fastest growing sports in the country right now. Almost every major race is experiencing growth in participation. USAT is aligned with 900 race directors. We sanction over 2,300 races. The majority of the large prestigious races around the country are USAT sanctioned races. Los Angeles Triathlon is not a USAT sanctioned race. Among the sanctioned races is how USAT chooses the hosts for the regional championships, the national triathlon championships, and the junior Olympic development races, among other events. The sanctioned races are the only way for participants to get to the national championships, the World Triathlon Championships, and the Olympic Games. At this point, in that sense, the Los Angeles Triathlon is not a path to the Olympic Games. USAT provides, besides a membership base to help promote races, event insurance, access to officials, a standard for safety, and we very much would like to see this open for bid. We believe that the Los Angeles Triathlon can be elevated to a level of national recognition and hope that you are open to creating an RFP.
Why is the LA event not sanctioned by USAT?
There is a history with Pacific Sports in which Pacific Sports was the race director for the 1996 World Championships. And as a result of that event, there were what was considered a breach of contract. It went under arbitration in a Court of Arbitration of Sport, International, and it was found that Pacific Sports was liable for the settlement was $100,000 to be paid to the International Triathlon Union, which is the international federation of the sport of triathlon. Following that, the ITU had set a resolution forbidding any of their federations working with Pacific Sports. So
I've just been handed a copy of that.
Yes.
So that binds you.
Correct.
And what is the term of this ban? Is ban the right? I don't know, whatever you want to
Ban
call it.
could be a right word. As I said, there was $100,000 in unpaid. It's my understanding that Pacific Sports has paid part of that, and there's approximately $77,000 that is now outstanding. And I cannot speak for the ITU. It is my understanding that they want this debt paid prior to that.
But I guess, but just from the standpoint, I see Mr. Kress wants to speak to it, and I'm not trying to litigate
I know.
what you've already litigated.
We didn't litigate it,
Or whatever. I just want to understand, you represent the governing body of the national institution for the sport.
Correct.
You can't do a deal with Pacific Sports.
Correct.
Just can't do it.
Correct, as ruled by our international federation.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Kress, since we've talked about you, go ahead, and then we're going to have the staff come back up.
If
Did
we-
you want to say something?
The reason we're not sanctioning is our choice. As you know, as you very well know, and Skip Gilbert, their executive director, knows, if we chose to sanction, we could do it today. The Amateur Sports Act of 1978 precludes them from banning us from anything. The ITU is a governing body. We had an arbitration. The reality is, if we want to get into that, nobody does, I'm sure, they owe us money. It's a big deal. But we could sanction our event tomorrow. We've chosen by choice. There are a lot of major events that do not sanction.
Why would you see that? Why would you choose that? That doesn't make sense. I'm
Well,
not.
I
Let me
can
just
give you-
back up for a second.
Yes.
I'm not an expert
Yes.
in this field by any stretch, and we're not going to be able to get at anyone in this city is going to be able to get to this level of detail and make these fine distinctions. We're just not going to be able to do it. I think the council has an interest in making sure that the event continues, that it's successful, and I think that part and parcel of that is going to make sure that it is going to try to ensure that it has as much official sanction within the sport as possible. So given that, what you just said makes no sense to me, a layperson. Why wouldn't you sign up with them? Why don't you sign up with them right now?
Two reasons. One, they have what we believe is an onerous charge of $10 per person for every non-annual member. And in Southern California, there is probably the least proliferation of annual members. So every person would have to pay $10. We sanctioned all of our events through 1999, and it was the biggest single complaint that we had was paying this $10 charge. I was on the board of directors of USA Triathlon. In fact, I was the one that changed the name to USA Triathlon. It used
No,
to be
we're not, don't bother. We're done with this part of the conversation. We have the staff come, it's, because here's that. I don't want to have we don't need a, this is not an intramural
there's only
triathlon debate. It's not that interesting.
The other,
It's not, seriously.
No, I know it's not.
No, I mean that.
There is one that's, it's important for you to know. The other issue is that their insurance is inferior.
Okay.
It's not as good as their other.
Have a seat, guys. I'm going to bring the staff back up, and we're going to talk about where the city's going from here. Appreciate all that. We're not going to be able to resolve the things that are committed to your sport and your sport's governing bodies to resolve. That's why you have those bodies. That's why, and you have whatever legal avenues you have to seek those resolutions. I don't think this is going to be a proper place for it. I'd like to ask the staff to respond to what you've heard, and then see if Mr. Zine has any questions, then we'll make a recommendation.
I think that with all the differing opinions, it's in the city's best interest to go out to bid. I don't think that there's anything wrong with going out for a competitive bid. I think it's to the city's advantage. You see what's out there. if the current operator is found to be the best through this process, then that's great.
Yeah, I'll just say that, Mr. Zine, if you have any questions that...
I think I do, since I
You
made
do?
the motion.
You do? All right, go ahead.
Thank you. This motion was stamped May 9th, 2007, requesting that this matter come forward, related back to February 8th, 2000, et cetera. Why has it taken from May 9th, 2007 to this point to get it to this committee? Because when I did this motion, stamped May 9th, 2007, as the expiration date of the contract is approaching in approximately 18 months, I mean, I gave us plenty of room for this particular matter to come before us, and I'm questioning why it's taken that long to get to this point. That's a lot of time.
Right. And I understand your concern. After your motion was introduced, we were asked by a council member to see if there was any way...
What council member?
Councilman Parks.
Okay.
Because he was interested in having the event move more into his district. There was this issue from CD4 and CD13 about the event being in Hollywood, that they had concern about it remaining there. And my belief was that it's from the 2006 event. So they were on notice from 2006 that they needed to move the race from the current route out of Hollywood. So all of this was happening. Councilman Parks asked us if we would meet with the current organizer to see if there was a way of extending the contract, moving the route out of Hollywood and more into CD8. We contacted their a prior lobbyist that was working for the contractor. We had several conversations. We said marathon model in terms of the cost that the triathlon would now pay us if we were to consider such an extension, and the route had to be moved.
But with all that in hand, why wouldn't it come to committee for review under a motion that was sent through the process?
Well-
Why would that forestall this coming before this body in transportation for a public hearing on the particular matter, since I was the one that had concerns, financial mainly, on this particular contract? Why would that in-house discussion with council members and lobbyists prevent this from coming forward for review in a proper committee form, in a public hearing form? That's my question. From May 2007 till February 2008, while the discussions were taking place behind closed doors. That troubles me that a legitimate motion doesn't get heard in public where this can all be heard. I don't care where they have it in the city of Los Angeles. I don't care if it's in the
Right.
8th District, 13. My concern is the financial aspect, the resources expended. That's where I was going. So
Right.
I didn't care if it was in the valley. I know it comes out of the ocean, and because I followed this in the past with Commissioner Scobin, who was on the Transportation Commission at the time, so I'm aware of, and I've been at the finish line. My concern is not where we hold it in the city of LA, but the particulars and the financial aspects and specifics. So I'm concerned is when a council member gets involved, I understand and respect that, but why couldn't that then be part of the parallel discussion when it comes to committee where we, in this open forum, discuss it, review it, and then make a recommendation to the full body of the council? So there is not this short period of time, but 18 months. So in other words, for the last, from May 2007 till February 2008, there's been behind-the-door discussions, which has prevented this from coming forward. That troubles me, how that would interfere with an open, transparent process on an event that's costing the city hundreds of thousands of dollars in subsidies. That's my issue. That's my concern.
Well,
I'm not picking on you.
right, I understand.
But I'm trying to say, if we submit something for public review and we talk about transparent, open government, why would not this be brought forward? And they could testify, that my colleagues could testify,
Right.
individuals could testify. And now we're talking about the short time frame between now and the time of the triathlon. Well, I gave it 18 months for all this discussion and review. the route, the particulars. So it troubles me that it was held up and not brought forward. Has it gone to Transportation Committee yet?
No, this is the first committee.
That's even more troubling, because now it'll go through Transportation Review before it gets to the full body of the council.
And budget.
And then it goes to budget,
Right.
because I only see stamped here, Public Safety and Transportation.
Budget was added.
Budget was added?
Yes.
Well, I respect all that, but now what you're talking about, from the time this is supposed to kick off, is it in March? This is already February, we're talking about next month. How it goes from transportation to budget to the full body of the council is absolutely unrealistic, if we're talking about an event next month.
The event is in September.
This
Is that
September.
the event you're talking about?
I thought it was in March. Whenever it is. But like I say, I gave 18 months to have all this discussion. Whenever the event is scheduled, if it's September, August, whatever, the window closes and there's a shorter period of time to go through two committees. And it could be stalled in the committee, as we know. It could sit and linger in the committee before it's heard. And if certain committee chairs have certain issues with it, as you stated, one council member wants it in his district, it could linger, and then we don't have anything except what we currently have with this particular contract, and then it's all of a sudden an urgency that we have to get it done, and everyone else who wants to bid is not able to bid, and we can't put it on RFP. I find that extremely troubling. But let me go on to some more questions, and one is the subsidy, where the first couple years it was going in the wrong direction, and we were subsidizing it to the tune of over $100,000. So I find a lingering subsidy year after year, and while they're paying us a few dollars, it also shows that there's no audit. It shows that the financial records are not audited, they're unaudited records. I find that troubling, that we can't verify it through an audit. It states in the document that the unverified, unaudited financial statements provided by Carbon seems to indicate that the total average, blah, blah, blah. Okay, unaudited financial statements provided by the promoter. We're not checking the numbers.
And that's one of the reasons why we believe the contract should be, well, we should go through this competitive process so we can make these betterments to the next contract.
And I absolutely agree, but I know it's growing in popularity. Triathlon's growing in popularity. There's TV rights. There's a lot of issues where the city doesn't have to run subsidizing this or any other event. And as you know, the city budget is bleak. If a certain measure doesn't pass tomorrow, it's going to be bleaker. I met with the fire chief, and he's talking about major millions of cutbacks for the fire service. We don't have the resources to fund or to subsidize. If they can't generate a profit and they can't subsidize and pay for all the services, law enforcement, Department of Transportation, and when you look at the dollars that we expend blocking off every roadway from the ocean to downtown, it's a tremendous expense. The police department, $92,000, Department of Transportation, $169,000, fire department, $5,000. I mean, we're talking about tremendous amount of money that we use to subsidize this. We can't subsidize this. It's going to have to be giving us some money and paying for all the services that we provide. And it's good for LA. I'm not against it. But my whole issue on this is how much we're subsidizing and how the first couple of years we waived everything. We can't do that anymore.
Right. One of the major changes that we'd like to make through this competitive process is to go toward the marathon model of cost reimbursement, which is the event organizer would pay the city for the incremental field deployment costs for holding that event on that day.
Because the mayor's directive is very clear. Subsidies and waivers on fees and issue on activities are not going to take place.
Yes.
And if we're talking about police service being cut back and fire service being curtailed, we can't, in good conscience, permit something like this to go with a subsidy. And looking at the letter from USAT, USAT, I find that troubling also about the arbitration and the monies owed, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in good conscience, for everyone's benefit, this should go out to an RFP, and everyone should have a fair shake at it and find out where we go from there. But I'm very troubled that this has lingered for this length of time because of backdoor dealings, because certain people want certain things. It needs to come to public hearing where all the cards can be laid on the table. So my recommendation is that we send it out for an RFP
Okay.
at
I-
earliest pace possible.
Councilmember?
I agree, no,
Well, there was some audits there. That's why I'm concerned that we were audited by the CLA. He came out to actually the Pacific Sports
I didn't
facility.
audit them.
But
Robert
you know what,
Matsu
but guys,
is the-
guys,
Okay.
but you've done a great job representing your client, but with all due respect, we're just going to move the item on, because we've heard a lot, and we're not going to resolve the dispute within the sport, and we're not going to resolve the dispute, if there is one at all, with respect to this contractor. I haven't heard Mr. Zine, who brought the motion, say anything critical at all about the contractor who has the contract right now. I don't think was in his mind. I don't think that's the issue. It does seem to me, and I don't participate in your sport, it does seem to me that it's the most competitive of all sports by definition, and it seems rather incongruous to not have a competition within the sport of triathlon to see who hosts the triathlon. It just seems, I mean, what could be stranger than having the triathlon sponsors saying competition is bad? So let's have the RFP, and let's do it quickly, and then the current contractor, with all their inside knowledge gained over the last 10 years of hosting this event in LA, might very well present the best bid for LA, in which case I'm sure the city of LA would be delighted to continue to do business with them. So this committee, or the two of us rather, will recommend that the plan presented by our CLA, and then it'll go to 5,000 other council committees, and we'll hope you see the light of day at some point. Thank you. That concludes this item. Mr. White, are there any other items on the agenda?
There are not, sir.
All right. None of those. No public comment. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Jack.
You can handle that. Yeah, I don't need that. No, it's